And the other piece of advice that I got in 1984, I believe it was, very significant. It doesn't matter so much on the YouTube and the internet stuff, but when face to face, never refuse a breath mint.
Yeah, tell us about that.
If you're offered a breath mint, don't say no. Take it. I'll just leave it at that.
You're just going to leave it at that?
That was a pretty significant piece of advice for me that I got. Never refuse a breath mint.
Welcome back to No One Knows What They're Doing, the show where we talk about how no one really knows what they're doing. Today, we have a very, very special guest. It is my father, Christopher Jude McGoff. Today's episode is very special. It's the Father's Day episode, and today is not Father's Day, and this is not coming out on Father's Day, but it was a few days ago, and we happen to be in Yosemite National Park with Half Dome to our left and the Merced River to our right, and so I thought it was as good a time event as any to interview my dad. So I'm going to ask him some questions. Okay, Dad, my first question that I ask everybody, do you know what you're doing?
Nope.
Good. Okay, we can move on with the show then. Next question, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Well, assuming I'm grown up, I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Born in Philly, but we moved out at 4 years old.
Got it.
And I grew up in Scranton.
And you had a family business growing up. Tell us a little bit about the family business.
I had the privilege of growing up in a multi-generational funeral home. My dad and his brother and their father, they started as furniture makers. And then that became a casket business, and that became a funeral business. And I grew up with death.
So you grew up literally above a funeral home. You guys had an apartment above a funeral home. Mm-hmm. That's where your parents lived almost until they died. What was it like growing up with funerals happening in your basement? And there was also a morgue down there, right? Actual dead bodies?
Yeah, it was a big old house in Scranton, and the first floor was the funeral home. Mm-hmm. And then in the beginning, you could just walk upstairs and get to our floor. And then we had renters on the top floor. But as we grew up, we took over the top floor, my sister and brother and I, my two sisters. And then they closed off that stairway, so you had to go outside, and it felt more like you were going into a business. But originally it kind of felt like our home, like old school, where they used to do funerals. And yeah, there was a prep room there where they did the embalming, and a really, really, really scary basement with a coal furnace, and you had to go down and shovel the coal, and it was so scary and so dark. And I was always afraid that the people, the deceased people, were going to be like walking around and everything. So when I opened the door, I'd say, "Hey, everybody, just get back in the casket." Like, I don't want to know about that.
Yeah, I don't want. But you said that funeral homes aren't haunted because it's the places where people die that are haunted, right? So funeral homes are fine.
Well, I don't think people haunt people, but it was only the basement coal bin that scared me. The rest of it never really scared me that much.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of cozy.
Yeah, it wasn't that scary. A fish doesn't know there's water. Mm-hmm. I didn't know I was growing up in a weird environment. I just was growing up in I got in there very young. Yeah. So it was all very natural to me.
And so did you want to take over the family business growing up? Was that the plan?
No. No, Dad had a real interesting take on that. I think my mother would have encouraged that. But my dad, when I talked to him about it, he said, and he might have just been giving me freedom, but he said, you really can't win here, because if you take the business over and screw it up, people are going to say you screwed up your dad's working business. If you take over and you do well and you grow it, people are going to say, oh, he had the business handed to him. Mm-hmm. So Dad said, you really can't win here. So don't feel pressured to take over this business. You should make your own choices on it. And as long as you're doing something you like and you're successful, that's all he wanted. And he really meant that. Mm-hmm. It was a tough business. I mean, how many Christmas Eves and Christmases we had a green phone and a yellow phone. The yellow phone was the funeral home. You answered that one, McGoff Funeral Home. You answered the green phone, hi, hello. And that yellow phone, man, that thing rang at the worst possible times. Mm-hmm. And, at night. And
he would have to go get the bodies?
Yeah, we did, once I got big enough. And vacations were very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it wasn't a big company. It was just my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And then we as children worked in the business. As soon as we could clean ashtrays, we worked in the business.
Yep.
And
But you did go to school to become a funeral home director.
yeah, I kind of bounced around. When I got out of high school, I went into medical school on some accelerated program. Didn't do that, didn't finish that. And then I went to the University of Scranton for a year. But things looked a little dicey with Dad. So I went up to Syracuse and got a funeral director's license.
Mm-hmm.
Because in our town, you had to have a license with the name on it to have the funeral home.
Oh, okay.
So I went up there and got a license and helped Dad for the rest of my college before I went to graduate school.
Okay, so you switched gears a little bit back and forth.
I switched gears a lot, Erin. I really switched gears a lot.
But you eventually ended up at IBM. Was that your first post-college full-time corporate job?
That was my first... I don't really know how to answer that question because I worked all the time. I worked for Frito-Lay. I worked for Gould Battery. I worked for... Like, we always worked. And that's, I'm not just saying that. I really mean it. I worked nights through college at UPS. And they were all good corporations. They really were. It's just that when I graduated, I had to go to work, you know. I started at 7:42 in the morning and left at 4:16 in the afternoon with a 42-minute lunch. I mean, it was like a machine. And that, I would say, was my first, like, full-time job where people were managing me heavy and trying to manage a career for me. I loved it.
I want to ask you about something that's equally as important as your career, and that is the concept of a planning beer. This is something that has been really important to our family that we use in regular vernacular.
Right.
Can you explain to the listeners what a planning beer is in concept and why it's so important?
I lived with Jack, and Joe. And on nights that we were going to go out, I mean, when I was in college, and nights we were going to go out for a beer, we'd have to have a conversation about where to go for a beer. And we never seemed to be able to come to any agreement. And we'd stand next to the door, which was in our kitchen above a drugstore, our apartment, and we'd have these long, frustrating conversations about where to go for a beer. And then one day, I forget which one of us said, wait a minute, why don't we have a beer while we plan where we're going to go have a beer? Why don't we have a planning beer? And it was just one of those... Like, I'm 66, and it might have been one of the most important. Confucius says wisdom is the correct naming of things. And that day, my life changed. Because from then on, we were never frustrated trying to figure out where to go to have a beer. We had a planning beer while we talked about having a beer. But as the beer went down in the bottle, the time we gave ourselves to come to a conclusion, it was almost like an hourglass. Because when we got to the end of our planning beer, we really had to decide where we were going to go have a beer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and then so then what do you do when you're done with your planning beer and you still have not decided? Then, you know.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, lesser people might just say, okay, that's what we're going to do. Let's run out the door. But now that the planning beer was empty, we created the transition beer.
Yes, the transition.
And the transition beer was the beer you have while you're transitioning from the apartment after the planning beer to where you're going to go have a beer. That was called the transition beer.
Yeah, very.
Very, very useful. Extremely useful. These are life lessons that are...
And then the third beer.
Well, that's the arrival beer. You can, if you're ever go to a college bar or anything like that, you'll see people walk in and there's just a lot of talking and like, oh, you know, who's here? Where are we going to sit? What are we going to do? Well, we learned that if we just walk in and walk up to the bar and order a beer, that's called the arrival beer. And there's no thought in that. You just walk to the bar and order a beer.
And you order a beer. You walk to the first bar that you see.
The first bar you see and you order a beer. That's called the arrival beer.
So if somebody wants to start implementing arrival beers into their lives, how would you recommend that they can go about doing that?
I wouldn't think much. After the planning beer and the transition beer, when you open the door of the establishment, don't pause. Immediately walk to the bar because this is just an arrival beer. You're not setting a precedent on where you're going to sit. You're not looking around for anything. It's strictly an arrival beer. So don't think.
Arrival beer, planning beer, transition beer. We have them every day.
Very, very powerful.
Every morning. And
by the way, for this interview, there's 2 beers behind this
we do.
log.
Allegedly.
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 And they're Coors banquet beers that
Mhm.
Erin brought for me, one for her, one for me. I think we might create a new distinction for this tape. This could be historic. This is the concluding beer.
Oh. That's kind of sad. The concluding beer?
Well, we could find a name for it, but...
You mean like it's the end of our trip?
No, I'm at the end of this interview.
Oh.
Like, it's not a planning beer. It's not a transition beer. It's not an arrival beer, but it's sitting right there.
We meal prepped it for this interview. So we can have it at the end.
It's exactly what you did.
Wow, that is some forethought on my side.
That really is.
Wow.
That's what kind of daughter you are.
Yeah.
And you've always been that way.
I really think about the future when it comes to
So
beer.
maybe your audience out there, by the way, it's a privilege to speak into your listening. You're quite an audience from what I can gather. But maybe the audience could help us name the beer that's going to be at the end of this interview or any interview.
Yeah, leave it in the comments, y'all. What do you think?
Yeah, leave it in the comments. I would like to know.
What do you think this beer should be called? The beer that's made in preparation for the end of something. I really like that concept.
I just don't know what to call it yet.
We'll figure it out. Maybe at the end of our conclusion beer, we will know the name of the conclusion beer.
Okay.
Moving on to something also just equally as important.
Equally as important as that?
Yeah.
I can't even imagine.
You once saw a UFO, and I'm just wondering, did that really happen?
All right.
Or were the 1970s just that great?
We were coming back from Mexico in pretty much a stolen car because your mother, who I met at Texas, had a nice little car. I was at Texas Tech. That's where I met her. She got a ride up to her house to see her mom. She threw me the keys and said I could use her car. So we drove it 14 hours to Mexico. And we spent I'd never been to Mexico. We spent 3 days there. So I wanted the audience to know we were coming back from Mexico in 1980.
Okay.
What happened was we were coming over a pass down at the border, and we had to take a pee.
Okay.
So Tommy Costantina and I got out of the car.
Oh, Mom wasn't there. You were with Tommy Costantina.
We had her car.
Who we've never met, by the way. We've only heard this name my entire life. I've never met Tommy. If you're listening, friend us on Facebook so that we can...
Oh, and Tommy, in the comments, please validate this story, because you and I have never talked about it since then.
We need some validation.
But I will be brief, but this is what happened.
Okay.
It is. We're doing our business towards Mexico, leaning against the car. And these two machines silently came up out of the ground. And I couldn't tell if they were tiny machines 2 feet from me or if they were massive machines. They were making no noise. It was really odd. And I was transfixed on them. They had lights, no sound. And then they just went like this. They were here and they went like that. And they were there. And he was looking at them. But what happened was I turned like this and I saw those lights reflecting on his face.
Okay.
And that's when I realized this was real.
Okay. It wasn't just you.
And I just remember Tommy putting his hand on the little car, and kind of jumping over the hood and sliding in while I turned into the car, closed the door. I don't know why we were so scared. And we floored the car and drove.
Yeah.
Then Tommy said, pull over. And I did. And we took out 2 sheets of paper and he said, don't say anything. Just write down everything you just saw. He did too.
Never seen the paper.
Never seen the paper. But after we got that done, we compared the papers and they were identical. So I'm sticking to that story. Again, we were coming back from Mexico after 3 days. But
did you have one of those little worms?
We ate some worms. Well, we weren't doing it when we were driving. I'm saying that was a true story. And now you're seeing all these people talk about UFOs, so it's getting more legitimized.
This new concept that you've been talking about, which is because of / in order to, which is this concept you've been talking about.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about?
And it's raising up to be one of the primes. One of the primes, so we can talk more about primes. So you got an audience out there right now. And after they watch this, they're going to go do something, anything, whatever they're going to go do. The question is, are they taking that action because of or in order to? And they're not the same things. Because if you do something because of, like, I'm going to go for a run because I'm fat and I need to lose weight. That's going for a run because of. But if you go for a run in order to be in shape and feel good, that action is being done in order to.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not telling your audience that because of is wrong and in order to is right, or the reverse. I'm just saying it's one or the other.
Yeah.
And it seems to matter. I call that context. And the context is decisive. Are you acting in order to or because of? Because if you're acting because of, your past is driving your action.
Mm-hmm.
If you're acting in order to, your future is driving the action.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I get more power, I get more contentment, I get more energy when I work in order to versus because of. I don't want the past to constrain my future. I want my future to cause my actions.
I love that. I see that a lot with jobs. People want to leave their job because of a bad boss, but not in order to move to something better. And I think when you lose that intentionality, you just end up making the same mistake.
I had to interview a lot of people the last 40 years, and companies, and I was very careful listening when I said, why did you leave your last job? Because if they said a because of answer,
Mm-hmm.
I got uncomfortable with them.
Mm-hmm.
But if they said an in order to answer, I was really comfortable with them. So I couldn't grow there. They didn't invest in training. I didn't like my boss. That's all because of. And I really don't care. And I don't find that's a warning signal to me. Mm-hmm. But if they said, well, this is what I'm up to in life, and I see what you are trying to do with your company, and it really matches. And the reason that I'm interested in coming to work here is I think I can contribute significantly to help this company achieve what it's trying to achieve. That's like ka-ching.
Yeah.
Total ka-ching.
It's forward momentum. It's
forward
not looking
momentum.
backwards.
And then I'm going to offer them a job which they're seeing as a path of least resistance to their dreams. That's the kind of person, that's the kind of help I want to give. You mean if you come here to work, you see that as on the path to your dreams? Let's work on that together. Mm-hmm. I can't fix your boss back there. I can't fix the past problem, mm-hmm. but I can help you with your dream. Yeah. We can work together on that. So that because of an order to in interviews, you better be real careful with that, mm-hmm. because we don't really care about your past story, to be honest with you. We care about what you can do to help us out.
It's a great piece of career advice. I'm wondering if you would also want to talk about choose. That's another thing that really resonates, I think, with people my age.
Well, this wisdom is the correct naming of things. And people use the word decide and they use the word choose. Kind of the same, but they're not the same. The word decide, pesticide, genocide, this CID at the end of words, CIDE at the end of words, that's Latin for death. So when you decide something, you basically kill off alternatives because of reasons. What movie do you want to see? Oh, let's go see, such and such a movie. I don't really want to see that because of this, that, and the other thing. They're the reasons. Well, let's go see this movie because here comes a reason. So decisions are selections based on reasons. Choice is a selection made freely. Mm. So why do you want to go see that movie? Because I want to go see that movie. Mm-hmm. Why do you want to go to that restaurant? Because I want to go to that restaurant.
Yeah.
Why do you love your mother? Because I choose to love my mother. Think if you decide to love your mother. I love my mother because she's a good cook. That's a reason. Then she has to be a good cook. Do you know what I mean? That's what she hears. I'm in a cage now. I'm in a cage called I must be a good cook. Yeah. Well, what happens if she gets Alzheimer's or something? Your love is now based on reasons. Love cannot be based on reasons. Love is based on a choice. Mm. I love my mother because I love the listeners out there. Here's something you can do tonight. Pick up the phone and dial somebody important to you, like a dad or a mom or a sister or a brother or a good friend, and tell them this. Say, I called to tell you I love you, and I want to tell you why. And try to feel their energy because they're going to lean into that phone call because the next thing you say is a condition, it's a reason, and they have to live into it. But you're going to mix it up this time. You're going to call them and say, hey, Becky, I called to tell you I love you and I want to tell you why. Because I choose to love you and you have no role in it. there's nothing you can do to change this. I'm choosing freely to love you. It's not based on reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I just put it in the comments after you do it, because that might be the first time Becky ever heard that she has been chosen for love, and it's not a decision. You can't decide to love.
That's beautiful. I
You know
really
what I mean?
like that. I think that's going to resonate with a lot of people. Very helpful. It just is. It's like your worth. It just is.
It just is, and
not
it's so
attached to
freeing. Why
anything.
is the sky blue? Because the sky's blue.
It just
Why
is.
did Tom act that way? Because Tom acted that way. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in it. It's just I choose Tom as he is. He acts the way he does because he acts the way he does, and I'm not going to think about it a lot. It's so freeing.
Yeah.
For you as the chooser, and for the person you're choosing about. It's just freeing.
I love that. That's like third layer. I feel like that's something that people might need to rewind and re-listen to really let it sink in, because it's just not the way our society operates right now, or any society operates, really.
And it makes menus hysterical. Somebody puts a menu in front of you. There's like 35 things on it. You go, I choose that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah? Did you have it before? Nope.
Just want it.
Have you ever had it before? No, actually, never have. I close the menu and you start talking again.
Yep.
Versus trying to decide, Yep. I mean, it's decisions. They're hard.
I love that. I think something else that really helped me as a young adult is, I remember we were in Burlington, Vermont at the film festival for my documentary.
Your documentary.
And we were sitting in a pub. This is before me and Michael moved to New York City. And we were going through this transition, scared to move to New York. We wanted to get a dog. Michael was trying to quit his job. It was a whole thing.
You had a whole thing.
And we were in that tavern, and you were just like, enjoy the gap. Enjoy the gap.
Just enjoy the gap.
And can you tell our listeners a little bit about what that means?
Well, I'm living it right now, listeners. So, love the gap. No matter where you guys are right now, you're beautiful and you're valuable. Whether you know it or not, you are. And the world is desperate for you to keep doing things. But every now and then, you get in between things. You had a job. You're going to have a job, but you don't have a job right now. That's the gap. And the way the story works best is, there's this woman wants to learn how to do the trapeze. And so she talks to the person training, and he says, well, climb the ladder. She's like, ooh, that's scary. So she goes up the ladder and she comes down, and he goes, do it again. Do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again. And finally she's like, well, I'm tired of just climbing the ladder. He goes, okay, this time go up, grab the swing out, swing back. We'll catch you. Oh, that's going to be scary. So she does it, and she comes down. I did it. I swung out and I swung back. And he goes, do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again. Finally, she comes down. She goes, I got to do something more. And he goes, all right, I'll cut the story short. Next time, go up and swing out, and then somebody else is going to swing out, and you're going to jump, and they're going to grab you. It's going to be like you go to a different swing. You've all seen that. And she does it, and she comes down. She's like, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. Goes, do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again. So finally she goes, I got that. I think you've achieved all my objectives. I can now say that I'm a trapeze artist. And the old man goes, you're not a trapeze artist. And he goes, Maria, go up the ladder and swing out and do your thing. Jerry will catch you. And she runs back as far as she can, and she throws herself into the swing. Mm-hmm. And she goes way up high, and she lets go. And she looks down, and she smiles. And she spins around, and her hair's flying, and all this. And just at the last possible moment, she reaches down and grabs his hands at the last possible moment. Mm-hmm. And the old man said to the student, what did you notice? And she said, it's not about the swing. For her, it's about the time she's in the air between the swings. Mm-hmm. That's where her joy was. And he goes, that's what we're going to train you to do now. Then you're going to be a trapeze artist. The same is true with careers. You have a job, that's a swing. You let it go, and all of a sudden, gotta interview, gotta write a resume, gotta get that next job, that next swing. God, I hate the guy. Yeah. But after you do it 3 or 4 times in your life, and even more, you realize you don't get many times when you're in the gap.
No, you don't.
You really don't.
Make it easier.
And why hurry them?
Mm-hmm.
You know? Why not just enjoy the gap?
Yeah.
Because the world is not going to let your listeners be in the gap long.
No.
The world is going to come and
Gotta pay
get
your
them.
bills, yeah.
And it's going to put them back on a swing.
Yeah.
And you might not get another gap for, did IBM for 10 years? Gaps are rare, but you don't know it when you're young.
Yeah.
And you don't like them when you're young.
Mm-mm.
You get scared.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're my age, gaps are the best.
Well, I think they mean that something's happening. You know,
something's happening.
Like they mean that, you know, anytime there's stress, it's like something's going on that's giving you that stress. That's a change. If you're not feeling stressed out or life isn't challenging you, then you're probably not growing much as a person. So I've always liked those gaps. And I think they can happen in other ways besides careers. You know, if you're in between, maybe you just got married and you're going through a transition there, or you moved to a new town, you know, or you just had kids. There's all these types of transitions. And I think the more adaptable you can be in life, the easier life will be. The more you can just flow with the river, like the Merced River behind us.
Speaking of which, do they know Michael? Do you know her husband, Michael?
Yeah, you guys know Michael, kind of.
He said something yesterday really profound. We came into Yosemite.
He's running around somewhere.
Yeah, he's a runner. That guy runs like a gazelle. And anyway, he said something yesterday that we can really connect to this gap thing. When we got into here, it's vast, and we didn't know where we were going. We really didn't know where our tents were. We didn't know where the supply store was. We didn't know anything. Yeah. And Michael said, wow, we're in disorientation. We are not oriented. But soon we will be oriented, and we can never have disorientation again here.
Never see it for the first time.
You never have the new eyes, and new eyes see everything. Old eyes, they don't see it, you know, they narrow in. It hit me, when he said that, I thought about that, and I thought how fleeting disorientation is. And you can never get it back.
Nope.
I'm not disoriented in Yosemite right now after 4 days.
We know what these are.
The gap is fleeting. And when you grab the next swing, the gap is gone. In the gap, everything is possible. On a swing, only what the swing provides you is possible. When you have a job, your life is limited to what the job can create for you and what you can create inside the bounds of the free time you have. When you get the next job, the same thing happens. The job creates a context for you and you have some free time. But in the gap, everything is available, everything. And so tying that back to the interviews, if I see urgency, it makes me uncomfortable. You know? Yeah. It really does. So how's things going since you left your job? Really pretty well. I've been learning to dance, and I've been fooling around a little bit training my dog. But yeah, I've got to get a job. But I'm really quite enjoying this time, and I've been able to help some people in my neighborhood. Yeah. Hearing that, that's like, oh wow, I want to hang out with you.
I think that's a great piece of advice. Another piece of career advice that I would love to ask you, because this is a really hard one for me, is how do you work with someone that you don't like? Because in personal relationships, if you have a friend you don't like, you can distance yourselves. But if you have to go in and work with that coworker every day and you don't really like them, what's your advice for getting along with people?
Well, let's just kind of break it down into three things. I mean, there are mean people, and they hurt other people. Yeah. So I don't really want to get along with them, and I don't want to work with them because life is very short. So what I'm not going to do is constantly complain about them to others. So all I can do there is sit down with them and say, you know, you're not being your best, and these behaviors are intolerable. So I don't care what you do in the rest of your life, but when we're working together, these are the behaviors I'll tolerate and the behaviors I will not tolerate. And there are two ways that I can enforce this. I can talk to the management chain, and then they can make a decision, and depending on what they make, or I can leave this job. Because if you tie these things together, I'm confident that I can contribute in many places. So I am not going to be around a mean person who does mean things to people around me and tolerate it. I don't think that's good. But the second one is just somebody who is kind of insecure. They're kind of ignorant. You know, you can see the insecurity in them, and they're attention seekers and all that stuff.
Probably most of the time it's that.
Yeah. And those people, I don't know. I just choose them. It's like they're not they're not. I just get rid of my expectations about them. Why is Bill like Bill is? Because Bill is like Bill is.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to make him my project. Life's too short.
Yeah. I just read a book on Adlerian psychology, and it was talking about how other people's life tasks don't make them your life tasks. So if, like, instead of psychoanalyzing Bill and your insecure coworker who's, saying all these snide remarks, just go to work, do your job, and leave. And Tina Fey, in her book Bossy Pants, which I read years ago, she talks about if somebody's not in between you and where you need to go in life, then just ignore them.
Ignore them.
My question is, like, what if you have to work with them? And what if they're just kind of like obnoxious or maybe they're lazy and they're not doing their job right? I always tell people quit your job, but some people can't quit their job.
Yes, they can. It can be difficult, but yes, they can. There was a group of people back in the early part of our country who couldn't quit their job. They were called slaves. Everybody else can quit their job.
That's true.
There is one thing that I can tell your audience that I am 100% sure of in my life. Mm-hmm. Do not talk about these types of people to others.
Oh.
Never. You can't sit and tell Mary about John's behavior.
Yeah.
You can only tell John. Unless you're working the management chain.
Yeah.
Then you can sit down, you can say, John, these behaviors, they're intolerable to me. I believe they're wrong for the company and they're hurtful to Mary. Mm-hmm. I've talked to you directly about this. Directly. Mm-hmm. I've not talked to anyone else. I've talked to you. You're not changing your behaviors, so I'm talking to our boss Wednesday at noon about this, and I wanted you to know. That's not gossip.
Yeah.
But if I talk to Mary about John, and Mary's not in the supervisional chain, that is gossip, it is destructive, and it is wrong.
It's not good for anybody. It's not good for
it's
you.
Not good
it's not
for
good for
you.
Mary.
You're peddling the toxicity. Yeah. They don't get the feedback they need. And you're not doing your job when you're desecrating these people to others. So really, you're going to see all kinds of people out there. Yeah. And just don't tell others about them. Tell them about them.
I think a lot of people gossip because they feel the need to vent because they're avoiding an uncomfortable conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
I think what you're saying is like the mature and the high road, but a lot of people just don't know how to navigate those awkward conversations and they need scripts. But I think the more awkward conversations you have in life, the easier they get.
Yes.
The more used to them you get.
Right.
So I think that's great advice.
And stop caring so much.
Yeah.
Like, just stop caring so much. You know what I mean?
Yes, I totally agree. You don't happen to have your business card on you, do you? It's okay.
Well, I do.
I was going to have you show it to the camera.
I've got it in my
I
Tilly
can blur
hat,
out your
made in
number.
Canada. And in the Tilly hat, there's a little secret compartment right in here.
We both have Tilly hats. Mine's back there.
Oh, these are great hats.
It's sponsored by Tilly. We were going to wear them, but they make our faces too shady.
Oh, these hats are fantastic. There's my business card. I keep it in my secret pocket, so if I lose my Tilly...
I'm going to show you guys. If you're listening to this, you got to go watch the YouTube video. I'll blur out your number so people don't call you. Why did you choose that word possibility on your business card? Out of all the words to choose. Out of all the words to choose.
Out of all the words to
Not
choose.
Not decide. Look at me.
Because... what's a business card for? It's to help make that impression. You're not giving business cards out to your friends. You're giving business cards out to strangers basically all the time. Uh-huh. And what you want is the pop. And when they say, and they always say, that's an interesting business card. I say, well, what could we do together? What could I do for you?
Mm-hmm. Possibility.
There's only two things. What can I do for you, or what could we do together? And so they connect that attitude to that business card. That's a very powerful business card. I don't think that's mine. I think that's the world's. Yeah. Show up as possibility. Yeah. It's a great way to show up in the world, I think. And it always gets a reaction. And that's the purpose of a business card.
It's a great networking tool, absolutely. I love the classic business card. I think people should absolutely bring them back. I was just at a networking event and they had a QR code. They had the one you can tap. I thought it was really creative. Speaking of that, what is a piece of career advice that you got early on in your career that you think was really, really useful?
Wear clean shoes. Because you can only have polished, clean shoes if you polish and clean those shoes on your own time before the meeting. And that means you just didn't put clothes on and run into the meeting. I think shoes, I always look at shoes.
Totally. What if it's a remote interview?
And that's probably a lot of your people now, remote
Yeah,
interviews.
a lot of interviews are remote. Even if the company's full-time in the office, they'll still do remote interviews. Kind of changed it now. It's like strong Wi-Fi, have a good connection.
Yeah. I just am appalled personally. And I don't think this is because I'm old. I think this is how it is. On the lack of attention to hygiene and clothing. What's it like now when you see a young person, maybe 30 years old, walking down the street in a suit?
Oh, yeah, you think they got somewhere to be. They're going somewhere.
They're going somewhere.
Even in New York City, you're like, oh, they're going somewhere.
They're going somewhere.
Yep.
So, like, it's not about you wanting comfort, you wanting casualness. It's about how you occur. Mm-hmm. And so I think ironing and having a nice shirt on, having your hair combed, it's more important now than ever.
I think it is too.
The casualness that people I see in business contexts is, all I can tell you is it doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
It might not work against you, but it definitely doesn't help you out.
I think humans have an incredible amount of bias, and we judge people very much on their physical appearance, and that's in one way an unfortunate reality, and another way a good thing, because you can control how you look to a certain extent. And if you just comb your hair, brush your teeth, and just look clean, I always tell people to just look clean. You'd be shocked at how far that can take you in a job interview. Now. Just looking clean.
And the other piece of advice that I got in 1984, I believe it was, very significant. It doesn't matter so much on the YouTube and the internet stuff, but when face to face, never refuse a breath mint.
Yeah, tell us about that.
If you're offered a breath mint, don't say no. Take it. I'll just leave it at that.
You're just going to leave it at that?
That was a pretty significant piece of advice for me that I got. Never refuse a breath mint.
Your first, your job at IBM, your first boss told you to max out your 401k, right? Back in the 1980s?
And they weren't allowed to do that.
Oh.
They were not allowed to do that. And Ray Duell, I'm having kids. We ended up with 6 kids. I'm making $26,500. And he said to me, off the record, max your 401 out right now. Don't even cash a check without maxing it out. I never thought of it. Yeah. And I never would have saved that money. Max the 401. They're making a match.
Take it out before it hits your paycheck.
Oh yeah. Get it out, man. To have the company shift it right over to your bank or whatever it is they're putting it in. But that multiplier between their match and then, as Einstein said, compounded interest is a miracle. Yeah. Between the compounded interest and the match, that, do you want to work for money or you want money to work for you? Yeah. I want money to work for me. I don't want to work for money.
But you really, really could not afford to do that back then. Nope. That was a choice.
Nope, could not afford it.
That you had to make because that meant less groceries.
During those first 5 years at IBM, that affected the kitchenware we had. Like that, losing that money, not losing it, but not having it. But I thank Ray Duell. If you're out there, Ray, I would never have done that without a man I trust saying, do this. And I did.
On that subject, on the subject of financial advice, do you have a piece of financial advice that you would like to bestow upon, millennials and Gen Zs in this current economy? Or maybe it's just timeless advice that you have.
I don't think that now is very different than ever when it comes to money. I think everything's pretty much exactly the same. The interest rates are going to always go up and down regardless of presidents or anything like that. That's just a big signal. But my dad taught us to spend less than we made and consider ourselves wealthy. Because a lot of the people that are friends of your followers, they have maybe fancy cars, fancy clothes, fancy things. The question is, how much debt do they have? Yeah. And I would really work extremely hard to be debt-free all your life, regardless of your salary. Simply spend less than you make as a rule. As a rule. And the only exception that I can think to that is a piece of real estate, a house, because it's so unattainable. So I think mortgage is the only exception I can think of. But you're dirt banking the cash. In other words, if you ever need it, you can sell the house and get it out. But you can't sell a suit, you can't sell a BMW and get the money out. So for me, you can master money if you spend less than you make, regardless of how little you make.
Before moving on to our last question here, I wanted to add that my dad has written 2 books. One's called The Primes, and one is called Matching the Root Cellar. They're both available on Amazon. Moving on to our last question here. So, and there's a bird chirping.
Isn't that beautiful?
I really want to know what kind of bird it is.
He wants to be part of the audio.
There's so many beautiful birds
Erin
here.
has us sitting in a meadow with Half Dome right above us, and it is, what time is it?
I
The
don't
sun is
even
starting
know.
to
6
slant.
o'clock.
It is.
It's beautiful.
I wouldn't want to be anywhere else but talking to you guys.
So, last question. Besides your dad, who was super wise
And kind.
and wonderful, we called him Good Guy. Who's another person in your life who maybe impacted you or gave you a piece of advice that has just stuck with you for decades?
Remember how you started this by saying, do you know what you're doing?
Yeah.
And I said no.
Yeah.
That's not just trite. When we started to build companies, we didn't know what we were doing. We had never done it before, and we hugely did not know what we were doing. Mm-hmm. Truly. And so you seek advice. And Dory Hollander was a person who came into my life and gave me advice. And she helped me. And, you know, without good advisors, I would never have in any way been anything but struggling. But Dory, out of all of them, was like really one of the best. She kind of, you know, talked into my listening. Like she spoke into me, not theoretically. Like I really kind of absorbed her advice. And I kind of parted ways with her after I, you know, figured stuff out and got strong, got companies going, but always really cared for her. And then I heard she was dying of cancer. And she only had a little while to live. And I called her and I said, hey, and she goes, you want to have that meeting, don't you? And I was like, yeah, I want to have that meeting. Yeah. So she had a wig on. She was upstairs in a big Washington residential apartment. She got herself downstairs and she had tea and she had makeup on and like she was really, really working it. And so we talked. It was awkward and it was also love, and we talked. And towards the end of it, she said, well, aren't you going to ask me? I said, ask you what? And she goes, aren't you going to ask me what the best piece of advice I ever got was? Because she said, now's your last time. So I said, well, Dory, what was your, you know, what is the best piece of advice that you ever got? And she said, well, I'll tell you what my teacher told me when I asked him that question before he died. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
That's kind of crazy.
It's like oral history.
It's like oral history being passed. And I said, well, what is it? And she said, in life, occur to others as intentional. 2, in life, persist variously to that intention. And 3, honor your word as your life in all matters. Be integrity. So I'll just quickly break them down, and if anybody wants to know more about these, be intentional. How many times do you sit with friends and say, I just don't know what I want to do with my life? Or, you know, you sit with an adult, you sit with anybody, and you say, I'm so confused. And people will furrow their eyebrows, and they'll act like they're interested, but no one cares about your lack of intentionality. No one cares about your confusion. In the world, when asked, always answer, this is what I am up to. Yeah. Even if you don't know what you're up to. You can only go by your, and don't talk to your parents about confusion about career or anything. Show up in the world with friends, family, coworkers, everybody, as intentional, which means this is what I'm up to, and be confident. Now, when you go home, you can go in your closet and go way in the back of it and say, I have no idea what I'm up to. But don't do that in the world, because the world can't help you unless you tell them what you're up to. Mm-hmm. Did you ever just say, I'm going to Spain, and somebody says, my aunt just got back. Yeah. Where are you going? I'm going to Madrid. My aunt just got back from Madrid. She had a wonderful time at this museum. They can help you into an intentionality, but they can't help you when you say, I don't know where I want to go. It's like, well, I don't know. Okay, great. Who cares? Yeah. So be intentional. there is no way that it's going to work out as you think. So persist variously, keeping your eye on that intentionality. So persist means I'm not stopping. Variously means I will chuck and jive. And I'm not surprised when plans don't work. I'm surprised when plans do work. But persist variously. Number 3, you can trust me. Because what I say I'm going to do, I do every single time precisely. I am precise with my word. Hey, you want to go to the movies? Yeah. I'll meet you there at 8 o'clock. Okay, that might be, you just gave your word to another human being. Be there at 10 of 8. And expect traffic. So what I don't understand is how you can have a meeting from 8 to 9 and a meeting from 9 to 10. I don't understand. These little chiclet things we do on the computer calendars, they're killing us, because you should not be able to put a meeting on a calendar and another meeting on a calendar without a 10-minute separation between them. Somebody should program that in to not be allowed, because you're breaking your word. How about this one? A kid yells down from upstairs, yells upstairs, "Hey, Mom, can you help me with my math? Be there in a minute." Really? 60 seconds? Do you have a watch on? We lie to these people little on up. We're constantly lying. But peak performers honor their word as their life, and they can hear themselves making commitments. Honey, I'm right now up here folding the laundry. When I'm finished, I'll come down. You can honor that.
Yeah.
Be there.
Did that growing up.
But be there in a minute. That's a really bad idea. And there is no small promise. There are only promises. And you have to be precise in every single one. Because integrity, honoring your word is your life, what I say is what I do, integrity is the foundation of trustworthiness. You occur in the world as trustworthy. When you occur in the world trustworthy because of integrity, people trust you. And when they trust you, they become intimate with you. They share things.
Yeah.
So people say, why don't you trust me? Wrong question. Do you occur to that person as honoring your word with your life? Probably not. So the 3 things: occur intentional with your friends, family, and coworkers. Never, ever mess intentionality up. Number 2, persist variously, because things never work as planned. And number 3, be integrity. Honor your word as your life. What you say, do exactly every time.
Yeah.
That's the best. When I got that advice and I mapped it against me, I failed on all 3.
You know, in a practical example, so sometimes or a lot of the times I help people message, companies on LinkedIn. And this is a great example of that advice. Be intentional. Don't message them and say, "Hey, do you have a minute for a phone call?"
Oh.
No, message them and say exactly who you are and what you are looking to do.
Absolutely.
I just applied for this job. I'm a video editor with 7 years of experience, and I want this job. And then don't just wait for them to respond.
No.
Persist variously. Follow up the next week.
Absolutely.
Find their email. Email them. Don't be polite. Don't be creepy, but persist variously. People always message me back and they're like, "Erin, I did what you said. I messaged them on LinkedIn. They didn't get back to me." And I'm like, yeah, they're probably not going to get back to you.
Back the first time.
You have to keep messaging them over and over.
We want to see that persistence. But I'll tell you one other thing. Why do you want to work here? We're always going to ask that. Oh, because I heard it's a great company. Oh, I know you train people and I developed them. Oh, the work is significant. All wrong answers. The only answer I was ever looking for was, why do you want to work here? Well, I studied your website and I looked at some of your speeches, and I can tell you what you're trying to do with your company. Would you like me to? Yes, I would like you to do that. Okay, you told the board that you were going to grow 20% this year, and to do that, you had to enter the DoD marketplace. That's right. That is what we're intentional about. I can help you do that. You don't talk about yourself. You say, I'll help you achieve what you're trying to do with your company, and I know what you're trying to do with your company. You're hired.
How do you find out? Because sometimes companies can be very opaque.
Well, you do research. Growth is always a good one to hang on to, because every company's trying to grow.
Yes.
And so what is growth? Market share? Is it followers? But hook on to growth, because we're all trying to grow.
Yes.
And if you can sit there and tell me that you know I'm trying to grow and you have specific ways that you're going to contribute to my growth.
Yeah.
In other words, in an interview, talk about me. Don't talk about yourself. Like, it's all about me. like, so I'm going to grow. Okay, you're going to need tech writers for your contracts, right? I'm an excellent tech writer. Oh, you are? Have you ever worked tech for the Fed? I have worked tech for the Fed. I can do that job. And I can start tomorrow. I'm like, okay, because I got a monkey on my back right now for a lack of tech writers. You can do tech writing, and you know I need it to do contracts so I can grow. Boom, you got a clean shirt on, you're on time. Make an offer. Make an offer. You can tell personnel, bump that 15% on the offer because I need that person.
It's thinking backwards. It's not thinking about what your answer should be. It's thinking about what they want to hear.
It's just what they want to hear.
And saying it.
You're speaking into a listening. You're speaking into a listening. There's a reason this company has created this job rec. They're hurting somewhere, and they're saying, we got to hire somebody. So they have a reason, and they know the reason.
Motivation.
And if you speak into that reason, wham.
Yeah.
They can't hear anything else. They don't care where you traveled. They don't care. We really don't. We want to get this done. We want to get you productive, and we want to go play golf. We really, honestly, I mean, we're so busy.
Okay, to wrap things up here, I have one more question for you. You've been married for 40 years.
43.
43 years.
Same woman.
Same person, my mom. She's here somewhere writing poetry. I told her to go look at a mountain and write some poetry.
Beautiful, yes.
Claire Ann Newman, well, now McGoff. Advice for marriage, relationship advice.
I have it, but I wouldn't want my audience out here to think that I used this advice.
Okay.
I came upon it late because I had to get help, and I got professional help, and I hope everybody in marriages is okay with getting professional help because marriage is hard, and it goes up and down. And when I went to see someone, she said to me, well, she said a lot of things to me, but the one that helped me the most was, she said, the really bad husbands don't even know their wives' unmet needs. Maybe they love opera, maybe they love poetry, maybe they're trying to be physically fit. Like it's things that Claire wakes up with that she really wants in her life. And she said, the worst husbands don't even know what they are. But she said, the second worst husbands are the ones who say, oh, I'll help you with your unmet needs. Like, I don't really like opera, but let me help you go to opera. But she said the pros, they hold their partner's unmet needs as their own unmet needs. Mm-hmm. They don't help with unmet needs. They hold the unmet needs as their own. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you, when I got that piece of advice, poetry came to mind. I didn't like poetry. Your mother liked poetry. So I helped her get that book written by taking care of things or whatever, and she's over there writing that poetry book. This lady gave me that advice and said, you need to fall in love with poetry because your wife is in love with poetry. That's when I discovered Billy Collins, this poet. Yeah. And I fell in love with Billy Collins' writing, honestly. And I remember giving your mom these gifts, these 2 tickets to go see Billy at the Strathmore, and I was dragging her. I'm like, this is my favorite poet. And I have several other ones now. That counselor was right, you know?
But you liking Billy Collins, though, was a side effect. So you're not saying become obsessed with their passions or their passions need to be your passions. You're just saying feel their need for that
as
passion.
Your own.
As your own need and not their need that you're trying to help them with.
Right. Take her need and hold it as your own need. Uh-huh. Right?
Yeah.
And man, that was, all of a sudden I started to look at Claire and try to analyze what are her needs. Mm-hmm. Like, what is she up to? What's she trying to do? And then hold them.
And by needs, it's not just needs, but it's passions, desires, interests,
wants,
all
of that.
Yeah.
That was big advice for me. Hold her needs and desires and passions as my own.
I love that advice. That's so great. Well, thank you so much for this interview. I'm sure the viewers and the listeners really appreciate it. We have our alleged conclusion beers.
Oh, I guess we could ask our audience, but for right now, maybe we could just call it...
Conclusion.
Conclusion feels... you have to name these things correctly. Can we just let them do it in the comment section? Help
We can
us?
choose to not choose.
Well, let's just choose not to choose.
Yeah.
Okay.
These are full of water, by the way. Cheers.
Well, there's definitely water in here.
Yeah. Do you have a joke?
Do I have a joke?
Yeah. I feel like you always have a joke. We could end on a joke.
I think we did okay in this.
Okay.
In this, I'd hate to have them say, like you do all the time, oh, that's just a dad. All right, I'll tell you one. Cops come along, and there's this snail, and he's on his back, and he can't get up. And the cops go, "What happened to you?" And he goes, "Two turtles came up behind me, and they rolled me, and they grabbed my watch, and they went off with it." And the cops are like, "That sucks, snail. Two turtles did that?" "Yeah." "Did you get a good look at them?" And the snail said, "No, it happened so fast."
Because they're a turtle and they're faster than the snail? Are turtles faster than the snail?
We don't talk about these jokes. We just they're all out there laughing hysterically right now.
Sorry. Ha 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 ha. I think I've heard that one too before. All right, that's it. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. If you're listening to this and want to watch it, go watch it on YouTube. If you're watching it and want to listen, go over to Spotify and Apple. And, comment below what you think we should name our beer. And if you've ever seen a UFO, share your UFO story. That's it. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks, Dad.
Oh, that was a blast. Thank you.